and let the facts fall where they fall.
Good experience working in law enforcement, somebody of impeccable reputation and independence.
That is the discussion in Washington today. Who will be picked to replace Jim Comey? There may even be a temporary replacement. Rachel Sutherland from the Fox News Radio is joining us right now with more on this developing Comey story and the fact that he was fired and calls for a special prosecutor. Rachel, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. No shortage of things to talk about today. Anything explosive in your mind come out of these hearings this morning with McCabe?
Well, I don't know about explosive so far, but there's certainly been moments where he's been under questioning. And he was asked specifically right off the top of the hearing about whether or not he knew if Director Comey had any kind of discussion with the president about whether he's under investigation at all. But he just didn't have a whole lot to say about his predecessor. He said that he really couldn't comment on any kind of conversations that Comey would have had with the president. So I think they're kind of trying. One other thing that happened is that Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who's the co-chair of the committee, asked him to promise to tell the committee if he felt any kind of pressure to any kind of political pressure or anything to quash the investigation. Could he give his reassurances that he would do that? And he said yes. And so, yeah, it's what you would kind of support, what you would expect in a hearing like this, and that he's been kind of similar to James Comey in that he's just not going to really touch some of these issues if he doesn't absolutely have to.
Very true, and there were the heads of the CIA and a lot of other organizations in there, too. This is a regularly scheduled hearing, correct, where they go in and start talking about their budget for the next year?
Actually, this one was a Senate committee on worldwide threats, and they are talking about that. They're talking about cyber threats and different threats around the world, but they usually use hearings like this to be able to grill somebody as juicy as the new acting director of the FBI. So, yeah, they're doing that, but there's also the director of national intelligence there, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the CIA, they're all there, and they're talking about different threats. But, yeah, of course they're going to try to lean in and get what they can from Andrew McCabe. And, but as you mentioned, he may not be in that position very long. It was very much seen that he got it because he was sort of next in line, and that we know that there were some candidates going over to the Justice Department yesterday to interview for this job, not for the top job. Now, that one will have to be someone who's selected by the President and the Senate as they work together, and then that person would have to be confirmed by the Senate. And get this, I mean, Democrats are already saying, hold on to your seats here. This could be a really heated confirmation hearing.
Yeah, I'll bet they are, because I played that bite off the top. I don't know if you heard it, but it was Senator Graham and a few others speculating on what the replacement needed to be. Maybe somebody who was not as partisan. And it strikes me that I'm not quite sure who they're going to find that fits that mold in D.C. these days. They said they don't want to pick somebody from within the FBI. But if they pick somebody outside, they've still got to go through what's bound to be a very partisan confirmation hearing on whoever it's going to be. Did you hear Condoleezza Rice's name thrown around?
Yeah, I have here and there, but more I've heard the name Chris Chritie, also Trey Gowdy, South Carolina congressman who was heading up the Benghazi Select Committee. He's also somebody whose name has been bandied about. But, given this president, I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a surprise. You open the curtains and there's someone you never expected. So
that's true. When I think of Trey Gowdy, though, it makes me think of taking a very big stick and finding a beehive and sticking it up in there and rattling it around, because there's no way anybody on the left would ever agree with that pick. That's for sure.
Well, probably not. And right, exactly. And so, right. It'll be interesting to see. At this stage in the game, just too soon to tell. But I do believe the White House will try to move fairly quickly on this. You don't want to leave this in a precarious position for too long. So, we'll see who they come up with.
Very good point. All right, thank you, Rachel Sutherland from the Fox News Channel. Take care. All right, good. There you go. Yeah, I have heard Trey Gowdy. I have heard Chris Chritie. I honestly don't know as much. I mean, I would like to have seen Trey Gowdy as the Attorney General, honestly, more than the head of the FBI. That really is Trey Gowdy's been a prosecutor. The head of the FBI needs to be a law enforcement person. somebody who understands investigations and the like. That's why I don't think Condoleezza Rice is a realistic person for that position. And the greatest, I know whose name I heard tossed around this morning? Merrick Garland. The guy that had been the nominee for the Supreme Court for the Democrats, who's a judge. I don't know if he's ever been in a law enforcement role, or maybe he was a prosecutor at some point. When I think of a pick like that, I think to myself, well, could Democrats vote against Merrick Garland? Or if you pick somebody like that who you've already tried to nominate to a major job, I don't know that he'd even be interested in the job. I'm just saying I heard somebody throw that name around this morning. That would put the Democrats in a pickle, because then they would be afraid to vote against him because they're thinking, well, maybe he'd get in there and do what they wanted, but then they'd be suspicious of why Trump picked him in the first place. I think maybe Donald Trump throws him a curve here. That's what I believe. I think it'll be somebody that's not on anybody's radar when this happens. Let me get back real quick to something that Catherine Herridge said this morning. She was covering this. I couldn't get her on because this hearing is still going on. She's going to be covering it all day. But Andrew McCabe was testifying this morning. And you remember the minute after Comey got fired, the New York Times led with a story, I told you about it yesterday, that suggested he had just gone and asked for more resources for this investigation. And great Odin's Raven, that must be why Trump fired him, because he wanted more resources. And Trump knew that the investigation was heating up and he wanted to throw it off track. And just nothing could be further from the truth, because today Andrew McCabe, registered Democrat, husband of former Democratic congressional candidate and friend of Terry McAuliffe, sat in front of this committee and said, we don't need any more money.
I strongly believe that the Russia investigation is adequately resourced.
So there you go. Now, if you think that I'm playing partisan politics by calling Andrew McCabe a Democrat, he is a registered Democrat. Took a little bit of heat when his wife was running for office because his wife put out on social media a picture of her and her husband going into a voting booth, going into not a voting booth, going into the doors of the school or wherever they were going to vote, saying she and her husband were going in to cast their vote, obviously for her because it's the election she ran in. And that's not a way to make an FBI agent seem impartial, to have your picture snapped doing that. So here's